Continuing on post-combine now with our Future 49ers series, we're seeing some names pop up in mock drafts for the Niners at pick 31. We're trying to figure out what prospects fit and how much we like them. Jordan Morgan, offensive lineman, Arizona. Patrick Paul, offensive lineman. Niners meeting with OTs at the combine. So here's a couple of them. Could be there for the 49ers at 31. Coaching staff continues to be filled up as well for the San Francisco 49ers. All that and more coming at you right now.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Niners, Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Eric_Crocker. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Appreciate all the everydayers out there. We love you, and we love it when you subscribe on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to play with. If your bet wins, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, here we go. A couple of new prospects. We're going to start with Jordan Morgan. He is an offensive tackle, played left tackle at the University of Arizona, Croc, and we've seen him in those mock drafts for the 49ers at pick 31. The 49ers at the combine meeting with a whole bunch of offensive linemen. Clearly, it's a need. We knew it's a need. We should not be surprised when they're meeting with every single offensive lineman potentially out there. They have met with either officially or unofficially with both the guys we're going to talk about today as well. And we've seen both these guys mocked to the 49ers at pick 31.
I have a question for you. What do you think about some of the coaches electing to not be at the combine and have those interviews like face-to-face, either one-on-one or with your team around you, right? Because Kyle Shanahan is one of those guys, he's not at the combine. And that it feels like that's more of a kind of a newer school type thing. You have some of the other older coaches who are there. And I would assume meeting with a player, especially how Kyle Shanahan is, he likes specific guys. Is he relying so much on his scouts to find those guys and that mindset? And then just whatever, even if I'm on Zoom in a meeting, I trust that they're getting the right guy? Or do you think it would be better to maybe take the old school approach and meet guys like Morgan or Paul in person?
I think there's two answers. One is that if the 49ers weren't in the Super Bowl or they had more time and didn't need to fill this vacant coaching staff in certain spots, maybe, ideally everybody would be in the room. And I know the 49ers have done it both ways before. But I'm pretty sure the way the 49ers are structured, and every team is so hush-hush about this stuff. But from what I've been able to gather, I think this is how it works. I think it's up to the scouting staff in the front office to filter through the guys that they want the coaching staff to look at. And then they give the coaching staff the tape, the names, and say, I want you to watch these 10 guys. And you give me the report, which guys you like. And Kyle Shanahan watches the guys that the scouting staff gives him, and he says, gosh, I love Dante Pettis. He is my favorite guy. I want him so much. That's the guy I like. And then the 49ers, adjust accordingly and go in that direction. So at this point in the stage of where they're at in the scouting, do you need everybody involved in these 15-minute interviews? Can you engage that much from these? I don't know. Are they still in the filtering stage of figuring out which guys they want? Because the reason I think that, by the way the 49ers are doing things. And so, obviously Chris Foerster, great offensive line coach, is going to be a guy who's going to watch all these offensive linemen. Kyle Shanahan's going to probably watch them as well. And then they come to a conclusion and build the draft board and draft the guys they like. Nate Tice of The Athletic tells a great story, son of former offensive line coach and former head coach. Yeah, Mike Tice. And although he was a quarterback, I believe, in college, Nate Tice was. But Nate Tice was like a, low-level scout, I believe, I think this was when Kyle Shanahan was an offensive coordinator with the Houston Texans, I believe, is when they crossed paths. And there's a funny story that Nate Tice tells about, and their structure was the same way. And Kyle Shanahan was tasked with watching some running backs. And he just kind of, they were in the elevator. I don't remember what the story was, but he asked Nate Tice, he said, What do you think about these running backs? Which one do you like? And Nate Tyson's like, I love David Johnson. And he wasn't on the list. And Kyle Shanahan went to watch David Johnson and liked him. And so when he turned in his, information, he's like, I like David Johnson. And they're like, why the hell are you watching David Johnson? We didn't put David Johnson on the list. That's not what your job was. It's like, so like this whole thing with like scouts and coaches and how this all goes, it's a wild scenario. And like, you can't step on people's toes and there's egos involved. And you can see how things can get really screwed up with so many people involved and so many opinions and so many egos and almost an over-evaluation. And you wonder how come teams aren't so much better when they have all this medical, have all this background, have all these smart football guys all working. And you can tell you and I watch the prospect, we see it differently. Somebody else sees the prospect a third way that you and I didn't see it either. And so it's just wild. But anyway, I'm pretty sure that's the way it goes. And then, the coaching staff weighs heavily on the decisions, but it's up to the scouting department to give the coaching staff the players to watch.
I feel like in person, you get a sense of more real or fake, right? I was talking to my wife about a couple of kids on our 7-on-7 team, and one of our kids, Dominic Calhoun, he just got an offer from Boise State over the weekend. And with Dominic, I've been around him enough to know, like, ultimate dog on the field. I mean, just super competitor. Off of the field, the most amazing kid. I mean, just great personality. Yes, coach. Amazing grades, his transcripts, everything checks out. And when you meet him, you get to feel that, you get to see that. I don't know if I would get that same sense from a Zoom, as opposed to maybe some of my other guys. I feel like they might be able to fake it a little bit more, kind of who they are if you're watching in the Zoom video, as opposed to meeting the kid in person, getting a chance to shake their hand, touch their arms or shoulders, and kind of feel that, like, is this the guy that I want on my team? I think you just get better sense in person.
You got to feel their shoulders. Be like, okay, this guy's built well. This is a strapper right here. All right. And so when it comes to Jordan Morgan, what did you see from Jordan Morgan, the offensive tackle, left tackle from Arizona, Croc? Is he a future 49er? There's a lot, obviously.
Is he a future 49er? One of the things that I felt like I saw in my initial note is he moves big. And that's the part I don't know if that's a 49er thing. Now, I may say that right now. And we've talked about a bunch, the Aaron Banks thing, where he was another guy where it felt like he kind of moves big a little bit, right? And what I mean by that is he has light and nimble on his feet. When he's has speed coming at him, how does he react to that? We talked about Latu, the edge rusher from UCLA, before we came on here. And I was like, man, I think he did a really good job against him, being able to get out and pass set in space. But that was my biggest gripe, just move big. Now, outside of that, he makes edge rushers run the hoop, basically being able to, pass set good enough, be able to kind of take off that inside, make guys take the long route to the quarterback. That was something I felt like he did consistently. One of the early snaps against UCLA, you see him get out in space on a screen play, and they got like blown up in the backfield, but you see him just, getting out, and he looked like he feels comfortable in space, but still just a little bit of big movements. And I don't know if that's so much a 49er thing. You watch Trent Williams, like, even though he's a massive guy, but when you watch him, he moves like a cat.
So
I probably shouldn't compare him to a future Hall of Famer, but
a couple things. It's hard because there's a pretty big gap between Trent Williams and a lot of other guys, especially when you're looking at offensive tackles. And I fall into that trap too. It's like, well, ideally, they would be as big and move as well as Trent Williams, but you're probably not going to find that guy. And you're definitely not going to find that guy at pick 31 if you're the 49ers. But I would say Jordan Morgan moves better than what you're talking about, what we saw on film from Aaron Banks as a college prospect.
Yes.
Yeah. He's thick. Jordan Morgan is in the lower half. Like he's a well-built guy in the lower half. And so, usually with thick legs means you have some power as well, just from the athleticism standpoint. And we'll get to the rest of the scouting report in a minute, Croc. But I wrote down in my notes that he is here's my one phrase scouting report. Hold on, let me make sure I get it right. It is solid if unspectacular. So NFL body, thick in the lower half, and he looks balanced. He moves pretty well for his size. but it doesn't wow you. It's not like, oh, there's extra athleticism there. And looking at the power, there's not extra power there, but he's got enough. He's got a good anchor. So like the short version of my scouting report for Jordan Morgan, Croc, is that there's a lot to like. He's a lot of good across the board. He almost has a checkbox on every single a check in every single box that you want, but then he doesn't have almost anything extra in any of those boxes. He's like just right there in all of those boxes.
Well, here's the thing we're going to deal with, right? And I mean, I'm pretty sure you see the comments. Anytime we talk about a player from a different position that's not offensive lineman, comments are flooded with guys. Why are you guys talking about receivers? Never taking a receiver. 49ers have to take on. Well, when you get to Morgan and even Patrick Paul, we'll talk about him in a second. That's kind of the best of what you have at pick 31. There's about 6 or 7 other guys. We talked about Fuega, and every mock I see of him, number 6 overall, number 10 overall, number 11 overall. Like, these guys are going to be flying off the board. And there are some good offensive linemen in this draft. But when you pick 31, you're not getting the cream of crop. So 49er fans, this is a question for you, and you can answer this in the comments. Do you want to force the offensive lineman position at 31 because tackle or guard is a need? So since it's a need, it doesn't matter who this guy is, we're going to take him no matter what at pick 31. Is that what you want? Because if so, it's going to be like Peacock said, solid, but unspectacular.
Yeah, that's a great question to ask and a great way to put it. And that's where you don't want to do is reach for need. So is Jordan Morgan or Patrick Paul a fit for the 49ers? Will we take him at 31? Where do we think these guys should go? Strengths and weaknesses for both of these prospects. We'll finish up Jordan Morgan, and then we'll get to Patrick Paul, big old offensive tackle out of Houston next. The next segment of Locked On 49ers is sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy. A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. The question becomes, time for what? If we had unlimited time, how would you use it? The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. It is so important to make those things a priority. The important things in life, so you don't feel like you're letting those things pass by while you're doing everything else you feel like you need to. And just check in every week is so important with the therapist. And that way you know you're hitting the checkpoints you want to in your life. And that creates more time when you're hitting the goals you need to hit every single week. And therapy can help you find what matters most to you so you can do more of it. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. Entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Jordan Morgan, left tackle from the University of Arizona, Croc. Solid but unspectacular. Good anchor, good feet, good balance for the most part. Confident and patient in his pass set. I like the way he can get out onto the second level. Consistently gets guys blocked is what I put in my notes here on the positive sides of things. And a 3-year starter at left tackle for Arizona. So he's been on the radar for quite some time for the Arizona Wildcats and played a lot of left tackle. And the question becomes, I'll just talk about a couple of the concerns I have with him is, does he stick at left tackle? Is he an NFL left tackle? Is he a right tackle? Is he an interior offensive lineman? Is he a guard in the NFL? And I do have questions about that because I want to go to the combine first with Jordan Morgan here. And Jordan Morgan, 6'5", so solid frame, solid size. We talked about how he's thick in the lower half. So 6'5". Oh, where do you go? Now I lost it. 6'5" and 6'4" and 7/8. Is that correct? Jordan Morgan. There we go. Yeah, 6'5". So he was 6'4" and 7/8 at the Senior Bowl. 6'5" flat. He got an eighth of an inch at the combine. 6'5", 311 pounds. He ran a 5.04 40-yard dash, which is solid. 1.70 10-yard split, which is also solid. 9.2 broad jump. Again, also solid. All really good numbers. I think the athletic profile is fine. I don't think he has extra athleticism where he just completely wows you, but I think he's a smooth mover for a pretty big man. But Croc, 32 and 7/8 inch arm length. That is quite a bit sub what teams want at tackle. And we talked about this with Fuaga as well. And his arms are even just slightly shorter than Fuaga's are. There is not many starting offensive tackles in the NFL that have sub 34 and especially sub 33-inch arm length. And there is almost zero offensive tackles drafted in the first round that have shorter arms. And we see it every year. Last year it was Skoronski, right? It's like, oh, he's the best offensive lineman in the draft. Just try him at left tackle. No, he's a guard. Short arms, he's a guard. He still got drafted pretty high, but the Titans played him at guard day one. And I do think that in the NFL, that's what's going to happen for Jordan Morgan. And while I think he does belong, and my grade on him is in that 30 to 50 range, I think he's a left guard more than a left tackle in the NFL. And I think that's how he's going to get treated, which means if you're a 49ers fan and you're looking for a good offensive lineman, he might be your guy. If you're a 49ers fan, you're looking for a long-term starter at offensive tackle, I don't know if he's going to be your guy.
Well, so I have two questions for you. All right. First question. If the 49ers, are saying, you know what, arms are a little bit too short, not ideal. He's below that threshold, what we ideally would like for a tackle. We're going to play him at guard. Do you think he has more value playing guard and being picked at 31 or tackle with short arms and being picked at 31?
That's the question. Does he even get a chance to try it? And at this point in the NFL, guys just don't. And people might think, are you crazy? His arms are an inch short. Don't look at me. It's the league that's doing it. Like you don't get a chance. 32 something. You're not a tackle. You're a guard, period. End of story for most teams, not just some teams, most teams in the NFL. I don't know if necessarily the 49ers are that team. But I think just when you look at his physical profile, it's good. It's not great. There's not extra. If there was a lot extra there, he might not get to 31. And so I'll kind of turn around the question again, Croc, because, and phrase it differently. It's more like, is it better to draft a guy who's a tackle, but not as good of a football player than to get a better player who's a guard at 31?
Typically a guard, and again, we talked about this yesterday, Quentin Nelson being drafted where he was, and a lot of times interior offensive linemen, you just don't see them being taken super high unless they're like special. And a lot of what we've seen from him so far is there are good things on film, but is he a special guy? And maybe not. So I'm going to flip it back to you and ask one more question.
I like this.
Ty Smith, the Cowboys drafted him a year ago or 2 years ago from Tulsa.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a guy who was considered a talented guy, but very raw prospect. So would you rather go with the guy who has tackle ability, but because of length issues with the arms, may be a guard, but maybe a little bit safer, or a more talented guy, but a much more raw prospect that may take a little bit of time to come into his own, which we've seen so far? Smith has definitely, he kind of forced out Tyron Smith, right? Who is, been a staple of the offensive line, one of the better offensive linemen of the year the last decade. And he kind of forced him out of there. So they started Ty Smith at guard and then moved him to the outside when there were some injuries and whatnot. And he's been exceptional for Dallas Cowboys. Would you want the raw prospect or in that range, because you can kind of find that guy with a lot of talent, or maybe a safer pick that may project a little bit better at a different position?
I would rather have the raw player if I thought he had the ability to be what Ty Smith has become, right? To be that offensive tackle and to be essentially in this class, we're talking about Amarius Mims, I think is that guy in this class. Not so much a guard, but just a guy who's only started 8 games that might, if you stayed in school and went back one more year, might have been top 5 pick. Yeah, if you're talking about somebody who could be Trent Williams, that might be your guy that could actually go in the second half of the first round. Now, the 49ers might have to move up to get their guy, but that's why we're going to look at all these players, stack the board, and if they can't move up, maybe they have to go with the guard because he's the best player available. But speaking of upside, I think the next guy does have a little bit of upside. Just finishing up the Jordan Morgan portion of this. Overall, how much did you like him? Do you like him at 31? What is your grade on Jordan Morgan?
Without watching more offensive linemen, it's hard for me to like him at 31. And the tough thing is we're not watching, we did watch Fuaga, and I watched him, and it was very clear. I'm like, are you sure this guy's going to be there at 31? Because this guy's pretty good. And then we checked. And before you told me to, hey, we need to watch this guy and we're going to talk about him on the pod, I didn't know anything about him. But it was very clear to me, this guy's very good. I don't see any holes in his game. And then now come to find out, I think I might have been a little right on that, because every mock I see out there, he's going within the top 13, 14 picks. You're not getting that with him. So if I'm not getting that, it's still worth taking him at 31 as opposed to taking someone where I might get more value, a safety, a cornerback, even though it's not maybe as high on, your totem pole with what you're trying to pick with the 49ers as far as position goes, like a tackle. But man, let me take this higher rated corner or safety or receiver. We talked about some receivers over a guy that I think he's more projected to be a day 2 guy and mid to late day 2, which we're talking closer to the 3rd round.
Okay. Yeah. I got a 2nd round grade on Jordan Morgan. I think he could sneak into the 1st round. It would be more of a double than swinging for the fences, I think, with him. And I think he's going to be an NFL starter and he's going to be a good player. I think he's probably going to be, though, at left guard, not left tackle. Solid prospect, would not be doing backflips to take him at pick 31. But I can see why some teams, looking at need, want to put him in there and force him into the 49ers at pick 31. And he's a good prospect.
If you said, hey, he's a guard, and we've seen him move well, work to the 2nd level, do all those things, and you say, you know what, you come in day 1, you're going to be starting over Spencer Burford, a guy who has started, and you see some good, but then he's kind of a rotation guy. And then last year, Feliciano came in, and he was able to, we're going to forget about Spencer Burford. I forgot about Spencer Burford for a while. I think it is a little bit more ideal to maybe put him at guard. And if you do that, then you say, well, we got a starting guard for the next however many years. And we took him at 31. The issue is I don't know how good of a guard he'd be. But again, a lot of draft is projecting. So,
well, they drafted Aaron Banks, 15 picks later, top 50. So a really good
but they didn't play him the first year. And people right now, if you poll the fans, they want the 49ers to address the right side of the line right now, to play right now, not to sit for a year. There's no Laken Tomlinson that's potentially ahead of you right now.
Is Patrick Paul out of Houston the guy? Very different profile. Is he a 1st round guy? Is he a 2nd round guy? Do we like him at all for the San Francisco 49ers? Big Patrick Paul, offensive tackle from Houston. Scouting report next. This episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Get buckets right now with FanDuel because new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to play with if your bet wins. And we're talking about betting on all your favorite NBA players and NBA teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and so much more. NHL, Major League Baseball, car racing. You've got combat sports. You've got snooker. You got tennis. You got golf. You got soccer. You name it. You can bet on it at FanDuel. And of course, NFL and NFL draft props. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, moving on from Jordan Morgan to another offensive tackle, Patrick Paul, who has been in late 1st round of mock drafts, specifically to the 49ers at pick 31. Patrick Paul, left tackle at the University of Houston. And I'm calling him the Mountain. For those of you who have watched Game of Thrones, this guy is very large, 6'7", 333 pounds at the scouting combine. And if you want long arms, he's got them. 36.25 inch arm length, which just engulfs defensive ends on the college level, Croc. And I'm watching Patrick Paul, and I'm watching his size versus some of these defensive linemen he's going against, and it looks like varsity against JV. He looks like everyone's big brother.
So I tried to go on this. I did not know how big of a guy he was. That kind of explains a lot. But there were certain things that give me the idea he may be the 49ers version of Ty Smith. All right. Some of my initial notes. He's getting long-armed, then off balance a little bit in space on a couple reps. Then he says, when he latches on in the run game, he's really strong. And I've seen him drive guys 15 yards down the field and then pancake them. He was at times beat with quickness inside. Then I saw him get beat with speed outside. All right. And a lot of this is happening in the same game. And I watched a couple of different games of him. But when he was right, it looked good. I mean, it looked excellent. the part where I say a little bit of Ty Smith, right? If you're saying that there is, there's areas he can improve on a little bit, but you still see a lot of the high end traits of things, then this is maybe a guy that you potentially take at 31. If not, maybe trade back a few picks, see if you can get something, and then take him early second round if other teams think that he could be a little bit raw as well. But from the trait standpoint, there were more things that I felt like jumped out. The consistency wasn't there as much as Morgan, but the traits jumped out a little bit more for me.
And I loved doing these guys in the same podcast and watching them back to back because they have the exact same grade for me. I think they're both early second round. I think pick 30 to 50 is the right spot for both these players, but they get there in a very different way. Jordan Morgan is the safe pick. He's the double. Patrick Paul is the boomer bust prospect. He might be out of the league in 4 years. He might be a star starting offensive tackle in the league. He's not moving into guard. He's not playing center. He's a tackle straight up, and that's it. And he's the swing for the fences guy. But I have some issues. So Jordan Morgan has started for 3 years, and he looks like it. Patrick Paul started for 3 years. He has 35 starts, but still looks raw. It doesn't look like he started that many games. So I have a problem there. And there's obviously a lot to like with him, and he is huge and absolutely engulfs defensive ends at the college level. Good athlete for his size. He's not a great athlete at all, but he is for a 6'7", 333. He can get out and move. And actually in a straight line, there's a couple times I saw him open it up and he ran a 5'1". Hold on, I want to get this right for Patrick Paul. Patrick Paul ran at 6'7.5", 331 pounds. He was 333, dropped 2 pounds for the combine from the Senior Bowl. He ran 5.13, which is really good for someone that big. So he gets his weight moving and he can go, but he's not going to be able to stop and start that well. And not a ton of agility there at that size. So, maybe even too tall for some teams and maybe for the 49ers. I don't know. We'll see. But
I talked about him off balance. I talked about him getting, long armed. Those aren't two things that you want to see. And I think 49er fans who, spend a lot of years watching Mike McGlinchey, who is 6'8", he still is bigger, but it's hard to have good leverage when you are kind of that tall of a guy. And that's when being 6'7", you have the long arms. You love that. Man, is he just maybe a little too tall to where guys are able to get under his pad leverage? Like, that's something that I'll have to watch more games to see if things like that are a little bit more consistent, or was it a one-off?
And luckily, he's just bigger and stronger than McGlinchey, so he doesn't get bull rushed like Mike McGlinchey did. So he does have that, and guys can kind of get under him a little bit, but he's just too big for these guys at the college level, and a lot of the guys I saw him play against at Houston, and I liked them actually a little bit better. I did see some improvement at the Senior Bowl, which I did like, and he was competitive on tape. He was competitive at the Senior Bowl. He's competitive, wants to finish his blocks, patient in his pass set. He's just hard to get around or through because he's so big and, can wall off defenders at the second level. He's not going to move like you mentioned before, like Trent Williams is, and get out on the move and look like a cat in space. But he can get out and wall off defenders, and he can run a little bit. And again, like I mentioned, started 35 games in college. But the one thing I hated about it, lumbers at times in space. That's expected. He's 6'7", 333 pounds. His hand placement is awful, Croc. It's outside. He's basically bear hugging guys. If he doesn't clean that up, he's going to be first of all, he's going to get beat a lot, and he's going to be a holding machine and a penalty machine in the NFL. And I didn't really see him get better at it in the Senior Bowl. And so I'm wondering if they just didn't coach him up on it. If he's just too big and can't control his hands and just misses his punch, and he's never on the inside with his hands. It's going to be a huge coaching point in the NFL. And he started too many games, and I guess they just call it differently in college. So the coaches are probably like, sure, bear hug them. They're not going to call it, and our quarterback's clean, so we're cool with it, right? So we kind of learn bad habits maybe in a way with his hand placement. But it's bad. It's outside, and you can't hide it either. He's got these big old mitts, big old arms, and he's bear hugging guys, and in a lot of ways kind of lazy with it because he engulfs them and just holds them and stops the play, and they can't go any further. Whereas, he's going to get a penalty in the NFL. He's got to stay on his feet. He's got to, stay in front of them and use his hands and have better hand placement. So he's got to clean that up for sure. A lot to like about Patrick Paul, but still raw, even though he's played a ton of games. And honestly, I don't know what to think of him. I don't know if teams are going to think he's a first round guy, because he's clearly a tackle, or if they're going to think he's a third round guy. I'm not sure. I think he's probably in that 30 to 50 range. I think he's got a very similar grade to Jordan Morgan, but they're very different prospects.
You know, one of the fun things for me is cutting on film and something else jumping out at you, right? Like I talked about when I was watching Cooper DeJean, cornerback out of Iowa, right? Then I went and watched the Clemson guys to kind of get a read on, okay, you know, let me see what Nate Wiggins looked like. And all of a sudden the cornerback on the opposite side, AJ Terrell's little brother, he jumps out. I'm like, well, this is the best corner I've seen out of these guys. Like, this guy looks amazing. It's fun to see something else that jumps out at you. Watching the Houston games, they have this receiver that wears no gloves, no sleeves, no nothing. It is disgusting. And he was out there making plays. And every time he made a play, it made me more and more mad. Like, how are you letting this guy out there that looks like this make plays against you? It was disgusting, but it worked for him. So that was just one of the things that kind of jumped out to me a little bit when I was watching that Houston film. And the quarterback was pretty good. I think the quarterback was pretty good. I don't know who's the Houston quarterback. Do you know?
I do not know. I can't help you.
Houston quarterback was pretty good, I thought.
I should have watched more of the players. I was lazy
locked in.
on
I try to be locked in, and then all the other stuff, you know, I'm always, it's like I try to offensive tackle. Oh, what's the corner doing? You know, it's just like
you can't help yourself, man. You can't help yourself. Croc's got that wandering scouting eye.
Yeah, man.
All right. So Patrick Paul, Jordan Morgan. I like both prospects. I think my initial thought now, and we don't have our board built out completely, Croc, is that you might have to go to a different position. I think there'll be a better player at another position and maybe even offensive line than these two prospects when the 49ers are on the clock at 31, but I could see them going in that range as well. And so that's I really think these guys are
it wouldn't be a reach, right? If Morgan was going to be taken at pick 38, is it a reach to draft him at pick 31 at the tail end of the first round?
Yeah, no, I think it's probably the right spot where you can start seeing these guys go off the board around pick 31 where the 49ers are being picked. Croc, the question becomes, and we got to stack this board. We don't have that many names on it yet because we're still early in the stages of doing our official scouting reports and putting grades on these guys. So Xavier Worthy, A.D. Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, Kool-Aid, and Fuaga. I think we both like more than those guys. So they're going to go behind Fuaga and Kool-Aid. Are they going to go behind Xavier Worthy, A.D. Mitchell, the Texas wide receivers, Cooper DeJean? Where do you like these two prospects on the board?
I like them behind those guys because if you're telling me I pick 31, I can get high-end talent. I'll take the high-end talent over reaching over another position of need.
So you would draft Xavier Worthy, Adonai Mitchell, and Cooper DeJean all over Jordan Morgan and Patrick Paul, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and I think the thing with Cooper DeJean, what really helps too, like, and you don't want to factor in this in the sense of his draft position at cornerback, but he does have return ability too. That has been really good throughout college. So, you know, it's like, well, I'm kind of getting 2 for 1 here with a guy who I envision. If you're telling me, okay, we're not going to play him at safe corner, we're going to use him like you use Jimmy Ward, safety, nickel stuff.
Croc, that reminds me. I came up with a nickname for Cooper DeJean. I've been workshop this with Williamson on Peacock and Williamson podcast. So what you're explaining a role that Jalen Ramsey plays, right?
I don't like to use that word with Cooper, but yes, essentially.
Okay. So Jalen Ramsey plays this role that you could potentially put Cooper DeJean in if you don't like him purely as an outside, right? And he's more of he's more pale than that guy, right?
Slightly.
So how about this one? Palin Ramsey.
There we go. Palin Ramsey.
All right. So it's funny because, you know, with corners and offensive tackles, a similar thing. You could, let's try him at corner. Let's try him at tackle. And you can still fail inside and be a really good player at a different spot. So it gives you some outs. Whereas Patrick Paul, if he's bad, that's it. You know, that's it. You're not moving to another position. So
not seeing a whole lot of 6'7" guards in the NFL.
No. Not a lot of 6'7" anythings except for offensive tackles.
Oh, well, there's this receiver, Johnny Wilson out of Florida State, ran a 4.53, crazy 3-cone, 6'7", 235 pounds, fluid mover.
Hey, there's your replacement for Juwan Jennings. restricted free agent. They got to get cheaper at wide receiver. There you go. Practically a tight end, Juwan Jennings is anyway, and very similar measurables to another guy who was a wide receiver turned tight end who was with the Raiders. Now he's with the Giants. I think he's with the Giants. Where did he go? Anyway.
Darren Waller?
Yeah, Darren Waller. We got to get out of here, though. What do you guys think? Patrick Paul, Jordan Morgan, who should we get to next? I know you've already done some work on Nate Wiggins. I think he's got to be on the list. Chop Robinson, we've been asked about quite a bit. Maybe go to the defensive side of the ball and then come back, and there's still a whole bunch more offensive linemen to look at. We got to look at wide receivers. Don't know what's going on yet with Brandon Ayuk. Niners could be in the first round mix. Could definitely be in the day 2 mix. So we got a lot of prospects to look at. Let us know who you want to see. And Croc and I continue to build our Locked On 49ers draft board. Talk to you then. Right here, Locked On 49ers.